Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and I'm going to be sharing teachings with you that are going to help you on your journey to enlightenment. We're going to be discussing the 10 Fetters and the 4 Stages of Enlightenment. This is where you're going to be learning specifically about the individual pollutions in the mind that the Buddha discovered, and that when you uproot these, this is where the mind is actually experiencing the enlightened mental state, where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, no longer experiencing any discontent feelings. So far in the group learning program, I've been teaching the path to enlightenment, the Eightfold Path. Over the course of 3 individual classes, I've broken that down into 3 individual sections. But what that Eightfold Path is working to help you accomplish is the elimination of these 10 fetters. So now I'm going to introduce you into these 10 fetters, helping you understand what they are and a little bit about how to eliminate them. But early on in your practice, you're really focusing on getting the Eightfold Path together, and then you're starting to focus later on the elimination of these fetters, because everything that the Buddha taught in one way or another is helping you to eliminate these fetters, but you don't really specifically start working with them skillfully until you've got the Eightfold Path really well developed. But here at the beginning of your journey in this group learning program, I would like to make sure that you've at least had an introduction to these fetters and you'll understand what they are. So we're going to share that with you after our meditation, because each class we start with meditation. So again, I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining in Facebook, YouTube, or on Zoom, or maybe you're listening to this on the replay. Welcome to everyone. And I'd like to invite you to join for our meditation. I'm going to start with a chant to kind of ease us into meditation. Then I'm going to come in with some guidance to be able to help you during the meditation. There's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet and we're all meditating together. Then we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting. If you'd like to join along in these chants, you'll find these on our website, buddhadailywisdom.com. You can click on free books, and from there you scroll down towards the bottom and you'll see the daily chanting sheet along with the translations and things like that. So if you'd like to meditate with us, there's multiple positions, either seated, lying, standing, or walking. Usually people are learning in the seated position. So you can take a position that's comfortable for you, either sitting on the floor, on a sofa, or a chair, or a wheelchair, or anything like this. So I'm going to ease us in with the chanting, which you guys are welcome to join in on. Then I'll come back in with the guidance from there. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Otang Bhagavanang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakhato Rogavitu Anuptero Purisa Dhamma sati sata tava manusarang Hoto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. ระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาโอตังมหาเกวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสคาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโอโตภาควาติ Okay, if you'd like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone in class today. Welcome to our group learning program in this particular class where you're going to be learning about the 4 stages of enlightenment in the 10 fetters. This is something that I'm going to be sharing with you throughout today's class. And as we go in our class today, you're welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. You can ask those through putting them into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comments section, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and unmute your microphone and ask any and all questions that you like. As I mentioned, today's topic is understanding the 10 fetters and the 4 stages of enlightenment. It's important that as you're learning the teachings of the Buddha at any point in time, that you never believe the teachings that are actually being shared, because belief isn't going to help you to be able to get to this enlightened mental state where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, where you've eliminated the 10 fetters, and now the mind is experiencing the peace and the calm and the joy, where you no longer experience any of those discontent feelings, all the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All these feelings and others are completely eliminated from the mind when you uproot the 10 fetters, eliminating them from the actual mind. What the Buddha is teaching you is the wisdom of how he did this within his own mind, and he's sharing with you the tools and the techniques that he used in order to uproot these fetters out of the mind. And as you do this and you're gradually diminishing the pollution of the mind, you'll gradually start increasing the wholesome qualities in the mind. It's kind of like the sun, and you've got the clouds that are in the way. And when the clouds are peeling away, the brightness and the radiance of the sun can come shining through more and more readily. And it's the same way with these pollutions of mind, these 10 fetters, that as you're clearing them out of the mind, the brightness and radiance of the enlightened mind start shining through. So it's important that you don't believe what it is that I'm sharing with you, because as I talk about these fetters and I describe the symptoms of them, you'll be able to see through your own direct experience that your mind actually has these fetters. Because as I'm describing the various things that you're going to experience as symptoms of these fetters, you'll be able to see how you've experienced these very same things, and that because of this, your mind actually has these fetters and it's hindering you from experiencing harmonious relationships in some cases. It's hindering you from having certain personal, professional experiences where you're experiencing nothing but success, and you can liberate the mind of this. You can free the mind of these things. So it's important that when you're learning the teachings of the Buddha, that you do so with eager ears, that you actively listen, and that you're not just believing the teachings, but you're reflecting on them to independently verify through your own direct experience if this is what you're actually experiencing. Where today we're going to talk a lot about the symptoms and kind of the problems that you're experiencing. We're going to be speaking very little about the solutions, where what I've been sharing over the last 3 sessions is the solution of how to fix all of this. But here, I'm just going to introduce you to the 10 fetters, helping you to understand what they are in the 4 stages of enlightenment. And then the whole rest of the entire program is all about helping you to understand the solutions of how to fix this. But you need to understand what the problems are before you can actually apply the solution. So that's what today is about, is really focusing on the symptoms that you're going to experience because of these 10 fetters. And then I'll share with you the solutions as we go forward throughout the program. And as I mentioned, you're welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. When we refer to these as the 10 fetters, they're also referred to as pollutions or taints or defilements. You'll hear them referred to in this different way. So these 10 fetters, they're referred to as fetters because during ancient times, 2,500 years ago when the Buddha was alive, they would attach a fetter to your ankle in order to keep you confined to a certain area. If you were a criminal or a prisoner, they would basically have a field that you would stay in, and there was this shackle and a chain and a ball that would keep you fettered, or it would keep you kind of bogged down in this area. It would keep you confined to this particular area. And now with this fetter attached to your ankle, you weren't able to kind of freely move about the world. So when the Buddha discovers these 10 individual pollutions in the mind, he refers to them as fetters because it's keeping the mind trapped in this unenlightened state where you keep experiencing the same problems over and over and over and over again. And when you eradicate these fetters, that's where the mind is free. That's why we call it liberation, that the mind's no longer experiencing these strong feelings like the anger, the sadness, the frustration, and all these other feelings. So the goal of the path to enlightenment is to purify the mind of these 10 fetters. And the Buddha provides you the tools and the techniques of how to actually do that. And that's what we've been talking about the last 3 sessions, is the foundational teachings of the Eightfold Path. And you would need to learn that inside and out, backwards and forwards, left, right, up, down. And if you haven't learned that yet, you can always go back and see the recordings. And I'm also going to be teaching this again when we get to chapter 4 and chapter 5 of this group learning program. You're going to be learning these teachings again because you need to revisit it more than one time. So that's why I've integrated it into this program at least 2 times where you're learning this. So the uprooting these 10 fetters is what's going to produce the improvement in the quality of the mind. And when you're learning and practicing the Eightfold Path, you are working to eliminate these 10 fetters, but you don't necessarily know which ones that you're actually specifically targeting, because with the Eightfold Path, it's a general training that's really working to eradicate all these fetters. And as you're putting together the Eightfold Path really well, you're going to start experiencing what's referred to as the jhanas. That's where we kind of left off last week. We were talking about these preliminary phases where the mind is experiencing these enhanced qualities. There's 4 individual jhanas, and this is like the light bulb flickering. You're starting to get glimpses of what enlightenment is like, because as you've worked and put together the Eightfold Path to a certain degree, you've eliminated a certain amount of the pollutions. It's kind of reduced to a certain degree. So you're going to start noticing these enhanced qualities. This is where your mind is absorbed a certain amount of meditation and a certain amount of the teachings. And through this absorption of the teachings and meditation and training your mind, there's been a reduction to a certain degree of the 10 fetters. So now there's certain enhanced qualities that are going to start being experienced as your mind's moving through the jhanas. And now when your mind is in the jhanas, you start pivoting and you start focusing more on the 10 fetters. And you start more proactively and skillfully working with each individual fetter to actually eliminate it. That's where the jhanas come into play, that they help you to be able to see that, yes, you've put together the Eightfold Path to a certain degree, because you wouldn't have been experiencing these enhanced qualities of mind without having put that together to a certain degree. And then that's where you really start focusing on the 10 fetters more and more closely. And I actually have a retreat that I teach once a year where we spend about an hour to an hour and a half on each individual fetter. And there's an entire class period on each individual fetter. But today, because this is an introductory program and a foundational program, I'm just going to introduce you to each individual fetter, helping you to understand what it is so you can get an understanding of what these are, and you can independently verify that your mind has these fetters, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to describe these symptoms of what it is that you're experiencing. You're going to hear me describing things that are occurring in your actual life. And because of that, it's confirmation for you that, wow, you indeed have these fetters. And then after we talk about the fetters, we're going to talk about how through eliminating them, the mind moves through these 4 stages of enlightenment until the mind is actually enlightened. And then we'll talk about an actual Buddha so that you understand what a Buddha is as well. So these fetters are organized into the lower fetters and the higher fetters. We're going to focus on the lower fetters first, and then we'll talk about the higher fetters as well. So this first fetter of personal existence view, this is where the mind is confused. It has misunderstanding. It has a lack of wisdom. It has a misperception and a misunderstanding of thinking that this body and or this mind is you and who you are as a person. So the mind clings to a certain self-image or a certain self-identity, that it wants to be perceived by others in a certain way. And now when you cling to this self-image and this self-identity, when you're being perceived in the world a certain way that you want to be perceived, you experience certain pleasant feelings from that. But then when you're not being perceived in the world in the way that you want to be perceived, you'll experience painful feelings. So here's some examples to help you understand this. If you've ever been in a social situation and you spilled something on your clothing and you experienced embarrassment, this is the mind having personal existence view. This is the pollution that's being triggered, that the mind is clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And now when you spill some kind of subject, some kind of object on the body, now others aren't perceiving you in the way that you want to be perceived. And now the mind might have difficulties or struggles with that. Or maybe somebody says to you, wow, you're so beautiful, or you're so handsome. That shirt really brings out the colors of your eyes. And you're like, and you get all these pleasant feelings. But then it's only a matter of time before someone says something degrading and disparaging about this physical body. They might say something negative or degrading, and now you experience painful feelings as a result of that. Maybe they say, wow, you're gaining so much weight, you're getting fat, right? And now you experience painful feelings because of that. And you can't control what other people say and what other people do. So as long as your mind has this personal existence view where you're clinging to this body, thinking that this is who you are, in some situations you'll get happy or excited. In other situations, you'll get painful feelings like anger, sadness, and frustration. So if you've ever looked in the mirror and you saw a mole or a pimple or a wrinkle or a gray hair, or you were losing your hair and your mind was kind of shaken up by that, and you were kind of worried about how other people were going to perceive you, or maybe you were even worried yourself about these kinds of things. This is the mind having personal existence view, clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And when you're not being perceived that way, the mind struggles. Or if you were like me when I was a teenager, I used to go to the mirror with some mousse and some gel and kind of try to get every last little hair in exactly the right spot. And I couldn't go outside until I had that hair in exactly the right spot. And sometimes it took so long I would miss the bus. It could take me 15, 20 minutes to kind of get every little hair in the right spot. And then when I would head to the bus stop in the morning to go to school, the bus had left already, right? So these are the kinds of things that you might experience. You might experience these kinds of things occurring from time to time as you're wanting to be perceived in the world in a certain way. You might have put on some clothes and looked in the mirror and decided, doesn't look good. I want to put on some other clothes. And now you switch to put on other clothes. You might have looked for certain jewelry or certain makeup to put on the body because the body has to look a certain way to go outside. You might have stood in front of your closet and thought about, who am I going to see today and how do I want to appear? That favorite shirt that I've got, that's what I want to wear. Or that favorite dress or those favorite pair of pants or something like that. You might have been looking through your mind about who you're going to encounter in this particular day. And now you want to be perceived in a certain way. And it's only these clothes that would make you feel a certain way and feel comfortable going to see these people. So as long as your mind has this personal existence view, when your image is what you want to project in the world, you'll experience pleasant feelings. But when you're not being perceived by others in a certain way, then you're going to experience painful feelings. And this is the mind clinging to the body, thinking that this body is you and who you are. Or you might be experiencing this with the self-identity, that there's a certain identity in the mind, like I am American, or I am Chinese, or I am Brazilian, or I am German, or I am Lithuanian, or I am Brazilian. Any of this I am around your ethnicity, your culture, your sexual orientation, your job or occupation, maybe your nationality, or any of these kinds of things, your mind can be clinging to a certain identity of I am this, right? So if the mind thinks I am American, well, now when somebody says all Americans are lovely and kind and friendly and warm and gentle, now, I've never heard anybody say that, but, someone could say that, right? And now when you think that I am American, now you're going to get these pleasant feelings because they're talking about you in a positive way. But it's only a matter of time before somebody says something negative and degrading and disparaging. You could be at a restaurant and 2 tables over, somebody's being negative and degrading and disparaging about something that's in your mind that you identify with. And now you'll get angry or frustrated or irritated because they're talking about me, right? Or you might have a certain job or occupation, maybe a police officer or any other job or occupation. If you've adopted this as your identity, if you're doing that job like you think I am a police officer, and now you feel great because you're actually working that job. But now let's just say you get injured or you retire or something like this. You can really struggle during this time because now maybe you're a food server, or now maybe you're at home and retired. And now the mind is no longer, I am a police officer. The mind is thinking, I am a police officer. But here you are serving tables at a restaurant, serving food, and now you feel disgruntled or agitated or annoyed because that identity is not intact. Or if you've ever been a boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife, and when you guys were together, you felt great because you thought like, I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend. But then when you guys broke up, your mind might have really struggled during this period, and you might have felt like you wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship because the mind doesn't realize that this personal existence view is in there, and your mind is identifying with I am a husband, I am a wife, I am a boyfriend, I'm a girlfriend. And now when the relationship's over and I am single, the mind doesn't identify that way. So it thinks the way to solve this problem is to hurry up and get right back into another relationship and assume that identity again. But that doesn't actually solve the problem because it's this personal existence view where the mind is adopting this identity. That's what the real problem is. I've even had students tell me that they felt that I am a good tipper, meaning themselves. They said, I am a good tipper. I am a good tipper. And when I go to these restaurants like a coffee shop or something like this, and I talk for 30 seconds and order my drink, and they turn around the computer screen and it's like tip 20%, 25%, 28%, they don't tip. And now they feel very conflicted in this situation and they're not tipping. And they feel very uncomfortable in this situation because in their mind, they perceive themselves as I am a good tipper. And when they're not tipping, they feel uncomfortable with this, right? So in this situation, the mind has adopted this identity. And now when that is occurring, that you tip, you feel good. And when you're not tipping, the mind doesn't feel comfortable with that. So the mind can adopt any number of things as your identity. It can be, yes, your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your job or occupation, your nationality, but it can be any number of things. And you ultimately need to get to the point where you realize non-self, that you realize that this body isn't you and this mind isn't you. And it comes through training of the mind where you strip this away, where I can understand that this body was born on a land that we refer to as America today. But my mind doesn't have to adopt that identity. That land wasn't always America, right? That land at one time was something else. And in the future, it will probably be something else as well. But our countries and different places that we go, we're kind of incentivized to adopt that identity. There's flags and national anthems and all kinds of other things. There's sports teams that people cheer for. And we identify with this as who we are as a person. We even got labels at birth. My label was David. And now we start assigning this various characteristics and personality behind this. So all throughout our life, we've been kind of taught that there is a you here and that this body is us and this mind is us. But more and more, you can see that there is no you there. And this is something we're going to be discussing when we get to chapter 16 of this program. We're going to go much deeper into personal existence view, and I'm going to be talking about the solutions of how to eliminate it. Because as long as this is in there, the mind's going to continue to get frustrated and conflicted and have different problems that you're going to experience in day-to-day life. But you can get liberated from this personal existence view where you understand that there is a body and there is a mind and they've come together for this existence. But this doesn't define who you are as a person. Because not only can the mind adopt an identity through the mind and through the self-image and think that this is who you are, but even your feelings and your perceptions, your views and opinions and your choices and decisions. You might have the perception that I am a Democrat or I am a Republican or I am kind, I am friendly, or maybe there's certain decisions that you made in the past. Maybe you were using drugs and alcohol and you've adopted the identity of I am an alcoholic or I am an addict. And if you've adopted this identity, now you might feel guilty or shameful in that situation, where what you can ultimately get to is you can realize that, hey, I chose to use drugs and alcohol in the past. Those were decisions that I made, but that doesn't define who I am today as a person, that you maybe chose to move away from those things. And that doesn't define who you are today. So if you've adopted that identity of I am an alcoholic or I am an addict, the way that people usually do that is they do that in order to ensure that they never go back to using those things again. But you don't have to adopt that identity and define who you are as a person today through the choices and decisions that you made however many years ago. You can let that go and don't define who you are today through those things or any number of other things, right? So getting rid of this personal existence view, you can reside more peaceful and joyful. Sometimes this personal existence view is so deeply rooted that people get to the point in their life that they feel like they don't even know who they are anymore. They might even tell their friends and family, like, I don't even know who I am anymore. I need to go find myself. I need to find my true self. People come here to Thailand all the time. They will unplug from society and they will come to Thailand in search of themselves. They're looking for their true self. They say they don't even know who they are anymore and they need to find themselves. But they're not going to find their self here in Thailand because the self doesn't exist. They might find new hobbies, new activities, new friends. They might find a new job or something like this. And they go back home and they're like, wow, I found myself. I went away for 6 months or a year or 2 years and I found myself. I know who I am. But then as they cling on to this job and friends and activities and hobbies, eventually all those things change over the course of time. And now they don't know who they are anymore. All that stuff has changed. So as long as you grab on and you cling on to any of these kinds of things, thinking that this is who you are, when you experience change, and everything's going to change around you because of impermanence, whenever you experience that change, you'll be conflicted inside. Whether it's being a boyfriend or girlfriend, and now you're single, that's change. Or if you're a police officer and now you're a food server, that's change. If you cling on to any of these things, identifying that is who you are as a person, that's your personal existence view. And now when those things change, you'll have a lot of difficulties in the world, where the Buddha teaches you that none of these things are you. Your physical form, that's not you. The feelings that you experience, like the anger and sadness and frustration, you might even say, I am angry. Well, I am not angry. The mind is experiencing anger. Or I am not shy. The mind is experiencing shyness. or certain perceptions, certain views and opinions that you have about the world. You might adopt this as your identity, like I am Democrat or I am Republican. That's not who you are as a person. You have maybe certain views and opinions that are kind of labeled as those particular political things, but you don't have to adopt that as an identity, because now you'll fight to death over that particular thing. Or certain choices or decisions that you've made. You don't need to adopt that as your identity either. Or if you've had certain traumatic events in the past, maybe you've been abused physically or sexually, you don't have to adopt that as your identity and who you are as a person. Or maybe there's a certain medical illness that you've maybe clung on to as a label of this is who you are, or certain identity in your consciousness. So you can eliminate all this through eliminating personal existence view. And there's certain proactive ways to eliminate this that we're going to get to in chapter 16. Then there's the fetter of doubt. What this fetter is where the mind has doubt about the Buddha, the teachings, the community that you're part of, your teacher, or your own ability to attain enlightenment. And it's very common for somebody to have doubt when they first come to the path to enlightenment. You might doubt whether this person, the Buddha, even existed. You might doubt whether or not his teachings actually lead to enlightenment, or whether enlightenment is even possible. You might doubt this community of people that you're a part of. Are they really encouraging? Are they going to help me? You might doubt your teacher and their ability to help you get to enlightenment. Or you might doubt your own ability to actually get to enlightenment. And if you have doubt in your mind, that's very normal, right? That's what people come to the path with, is they come here with doubt. But the way that you eliminate this is not through blind belief or faith or anything like that. The way that you eliminate doubt is you investigate the teachings, you examine them. And by examining the teachings, investigating, you then reflect on them to independently verify whether they're true or they're false. And then you start practicing the teachings. You integrate them into your life. Start uprooting these pollutions out of your mind. And as you do, you start seeing improvement to the condition of your mind and the condition of your life, where your relationships really start to blossom. And you'll know that these teachings are leading to your enlightenment. You won't be enlightened by the time you eliminate doubt, but you will get to the point where you know that these teachings are improving the condition of the mind. Because there'll be certain situations that you were once in where you were angry and frustrated and sad or some other discontent feeling. And now when you experience that exact same situation, your mind experiences it differently, that you can maintain your peace and your joy. You're no longer discontent. You'll notice that your personal and professional relationships are improving. You'll notice that you have more focus and concentration and clarity and deep memory in the mind. And as you're seeing these improvements to the condition of your mind, you'll get to the point where you have no doubt these teachings are leading to an improved condition of mind in your life. But you won't be enlightened by that point. You'll have confirmed confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, and your own ability to get to enlightenment, because you're actually doing it. You can actually see that it's occurring, that you're working your way towards this enlightened mental state. So if you have doubt in your mind right now, that's completely normal. And you're not going to get rid of it through belief. You get rid of it through investigating and examining the teachings and cultivating wisdom about the teachings, because you'll see that they're actually true. And as you're applying them in your day-to-day life and you're seeing the improvement, this is what's going to lead to the elimination of doubt. And one of the things you can do with this doubt to make it beneficial for you is to actually harness it to create an inquisitive mind. When I came to the path to enlightenment, I had doubt. But what I did is I harnessed it. I was like, yeah, I doubt whether these teachings are true or false. Let me roll up the sleeves. Let me sink my teeth in, and let me really see what these teachings can produce. And when you do that, that's what actually eliminates your doubt. So if you have doubt, yeah, ask all the questions you like. And then as you examine and investigate the teachings, that's what's going to help create improvement to the condition of your mind as you're practicing them. And then eventually you'll get to the point where you'll have no doubt that these teachings are leading to an improved condition of mind. You'll have no doubt that the Buddha lived and existed because you can see his teachings working. You'll have no doubt in the teachings. You'll see the support and encouragement from this community. Your teacher would have been helping you to get to a certain improved mental state. And your own ability, you can see like, wow, I can do this. I've learned a certain amount of things. I've applied it in life, and I see the improvement. Then there's wrong behavior and observances. What wrong behavior is if your mind has this fetter, there's certain unwise moral conduct that you're doing in the world that is causing harm. And now this harm is coming back to you. Certain speech or certain actions, or maybe even your livelihood, you might be causing harm to others without even realizing it. It's not because you're a bad person or you've done anything wrong. It's just that the mind is lacking wisdom of ways to interact in the world through your moral conduct in a way that would produce wholesome results. So you might be making decisions about the way you interact with others that is producing unwholesome results. So for example, if you're lying, or you're slandering and gossiping people, or if you're speaking harshly with bitterness and hostility, or if you have frivolous speech where you're just yada, 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 unpurposefully, unbeneficially, this is all causing harm through your speech. So the Buddha teaches you how to speak gentle and wise and with a mind of loving kindness in a way that's beneficial. But if you lack the wisdom of that, you might have certain wrong behavior, so to speak, where you're kind of spewing this unwise moral conduct into the world. And it's producing unwholesome results for you. Because if you're being bitter and harsh and hostile to others, those people are going to be bitter and harsh and hostile right back to you. So if you're noticing in your relationship with your life partner or your children, or maybe your mother, your father, your brothers and sisters, maybe your coworkers or your boss, if you have hostility and bitterness within your own mind and you're putting that out through your intentions, your speech, or your actions, that's all going to just come back to you. So what the Buddha teaches you is to shut down this unwise moral conduct. It's kind of like there's this oil pipe that is busted and now it's like spewing oil all over the place. Well, you're not going to go clean up the oil first. That's not what you're going to do. You're going to shut down the pipe so you don't keep spewing oil all over the place. So that's why in that Eightfold Path 2 weeks ago, we talked about the moral conduct section, not as rules or commandments or anything like that, but instead just showing you the natural law of karma. Certain decisions that you make, certain actions or certain causes, they're going to lead to either wholesome results or unwholesome results. When you make wise decisions, it produces wholesome results or wholesome karma. And when you make unwise decisions, it produces unwholesome karma or unwholesome results. But with a lack of wisdom of the natural law of karma, you will have certain behaviors that are unwise and not even realizing it. This is why you can go into a conversation with what you think are the very best intentions, and you can have that conversation and it can just blow up on you without you even realizing it. Like, oh my goodness, what just happened? Right? Because your mind is lacking wisdom of wise, wholesome moral conduct. So by the time you eliminate wrong behavior, you will have brought your moral conduct up to the level that you see in the Eightfold Path that I taught 2 weeks ago. Then there's wrong observances. This is the second part of this particular fetter. This is where the mind might think that rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship is going to lead to some kind of improvements in your life. And if you have that in your mind, then there's this wrong observances where the mind thinks that, if I get this water sprinkled on me, or if I put this wafer on my tongue, or if I drink this little bit of juice, or if I take this water and sprinkle it on myself, or if I get this string tied on my wrist, or maybe there's this smoke and incense that is spread throughout a group of people and it's thought to cleanse you or something like this. If you've been involved in rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, then you might already have eliminated this because you realize that these haven't led to an improvement in your life. Oftentimes before people even start studying with me, they've already eliminated this portion of this fetter because they've done the rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. And they see they're still angry, they're still frustrated, they're still struggling at work or in their relationships and things like this. So there's no amount of rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship that is going to help you to cultivate wisdom in your mind. That's what's going to lead to transformation in your life and in your mind is cultivation of wisdom. So that's why the Buddha taught that any kind of rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship doesn't lead to wisdom and it doesn't lead to improvements in the condition of your mind in your life. So as long as you have this wrong observances where you think that these things are going to improve your life, your mind can't actually focus on the real things that you need, which is cultivation of wisdom, making wiser decisions, and experiencing more and more wholesome results in your life. So if you thought I could just sprinkle water on you and everything would get better, then your mind's still having this wrong observances. But you can get to the point where you realize that this is untrue and that these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship isn't going to lead to an improved condition of life or improved condition of your mind. Now, if you're with your family or friends and you guys are going out on a social event and maybe they'd like to go to church or to the synagogue or to the mosque or something like this or the temple, and maybe they're conducting certain rites and rituals and ceremonies of worship there, and maybe you're even like kind of like around while they're doing these kinds of things, as long as your mind understands that these things don't cultivate wisdom and it's not going to lead to improved condition of life or to your mind, then that's fine. That's what you choose to do because you're participating with your friends or family perhaps, and you're just kind of hanging out for this social event. Maybe you guys are going to go have some dinner or go to the movies or something like that afterwards, or some family event. So it's not about necessarily what you do or things like this. It's about how your mind thinks about, do you understand that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship doesn't produce wisdom and isn't going to lead to improved results in your life. So that's how you eliminate wrong observances, is that you just see the truth that it doesn't cultivate wisdom. And like I mentioned, a lot of students have already eliminated that portion of this fetter before they've ever even come to learn with me, because they know that I don't do rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. Even this chanting that we did, that's not a ritual or a ceremony or worship. That's to help ease the mind into meditation and actually get more benefit out of the meditation itself. So you can cultivate mindfulness and concentration as you're easing into meditation. Then there's sensual desire. What sensual desire is where the mind has longing and yearning through the sense spaces, wanting permanently agreeable contact. The sense spaces are the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. The mind is going to experience contact. You're going to see physical forms through the eyes. You're going to hear sounds through the ears. You're going to smell certain odors. You're going to have certain flavors that touch the tongue. You're going to have certain physical objects that come in contact with the body. And then you're going to have certain mental objects that go through the mind. And the mind wants agreeable contact. And when you have agreeable contact, based on your sensual desire that the mind's wanting and expecting something, if you have that agreeable contact, you'll get pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But if you have disagreeable contact, because of this sensual desire, you're seeing this as disagreeable, and now the mind's going to experience painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and other painful feelings like guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, and things like that. So I'll give you examples of this. If you were walking down the street and you see a parent and a child holding hands, you might be like, that's so beautiful. That's so lovely. Look at mom and dad and the child holding hands. This is so beautiful. It's so lovely, right? And you might get all these pleasant feelings because of that, based on the condition of seeing something that is agreeable to you. But now you turn the corner and you see a parent slap their child across the face, and the child starts crying and crying and crying. And this might be disagreeable to you, right? And now you experience anger or frustration because the mind's not getting its craving fulfilled. That central desire isn't getting fulfilled. Now, we're not talking about what's wise or unwise, because obviously it's super unwise to hit anybody, including a child. But this is the mind longing, yearning, wanting permanently agreeable contact. Or say with the ear, like a certain sound. Like if you're at a stoplight and someone pulls up to you with certain music that you like and that you crave, and you're like, man, that's my jam. All right, let's dance. Let's have a party. Let's have a good time. And you get all these pleasant feelings as a result of this music. Well, now that was agreeable to you and that was fulfilling your craving. But when you pull up to the next traffic light and somebody else pulls up to you with some kind of music that you despise and you just think it's the most horrible music ever, you might get frustrated and irritated and annoyed and agitated. And you might actually think it's that person who's causing you to experience this. But in reality, it's your sensual desire. It's the mind craving permanently agreeable contact. And you can't get that because you live in an impermanent world, that you're not going to get permanently agreeable contact. So sensual desire is essentially these conditions that the mind says, if I get this, and I get this, and I get this, and I get this, and I get this, then I'll be happy. The mind wants things your way. Whereas if your bank account is up here, you'll be happy because you're getting what you want. But then when your bank account goes down here, the mind sees this as disagreeable, and now it gets angry or frustrated. Or if your mom and dad do this, you might be happy. But then when they do this over here, you get angry or frustrated because they're not meeting your expectations. They're not doing what you want them to do. The unenlightened mind, because of its sensual desire, it wants things the way that it wants. And this is where an individual can become old and very grumpy and irritable because they have all these expectations in their mind. They want this and this and this and this and this and this and this. And now the amount of time that you can be happy diminishes. It becomes less and less and less and less the more expectations that you have. But when you clear this sensual desire out of the way, where you don't want and long and yearn for things to be one particular way, then you can be happy all the time. You can experience the unconditioned happiness. Because as long as you have sensual desire in your mind, you're going to experience conditional feelings. Based on the condition that it's sunny outside, you might get happy or excited. But because the sun is impermanent, when now it starts to rain, you will be angry or sad or frustrated or irritated or annoyed because you've based your inner feelings on the condition of the sun. And because the sun is impermanent, that means your feeling of happiness is impermanent too. So when that sun changes to now it's rain, that's where your happiness is gone. And now you're experiencing the frustration or annoyance or agitation or something like that. So the mind is essentially wired in the unenlightened state to form its feelings based on some condition. And this is the sensual desire. The sensual desire wants things to be a certain way. Essentially, when we were growing up as children, we might have had a craving or this sensual desire for ice cream and chocolate. And we really wanted this ice cream and chocolate. And it was like, mommy, daddy, get me this ice cream and chocolate. And they're like, sure, here you go. You can have ice cream and chocolate. Ah, you're such a great mommy and daddy. I love you so much. Ah, you're so wonderful because you're getting what you want. And then at some point you were like, mommy and daddy, can I have chocolate and ice cream? And they're like, no, you can't have it. You're really angry and frustrated. And you might attribute that to your mom or your dad, thinking that they're the ones who are causing your anger. So when your sensual desire is getting fulfilled, you'll get those happy, pleasant feelings. But when it's not getting fulfilled, your mind will move to this ill will, the fifth fetter, that your mind will now experience the anger. And now you might be bitter and harsh and hostile through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. And now you're speaking in ways or acting in ways that is unskillful. And you start damaging your relationships. That this mind has this bitterness and hostility and harshness, this agitation, this frustration. And the mind falsely attributes these painful feelings to something external. So when your sensual desires aren't getting fulfilled and this ill will is arising, it feels uncomfortable for you. It feels painful. So what you might have been doing is pushing people away or pushing the situation away. The mind thinks if I push this person away, then that's going to make everything better. But it doesn't make everything better because you still get annoyed, you still get frustrated, you still get agitated. If this person was the real cause of your problem, when you push them away and you push them out of your life, you'd be peaceful for the rest of your life. But that's not what occurred. You still experience annoyance and guilt and shame and fear and these other discontent feelings. Or when those painful feelings are arising in the mind, ill will, this anger and hostility and aggression is arising, you might be bitter and harsh and hostile towards people, trying to almost fear them into doing things your way. This is like an animal growling and roaring at another animal, trying to get that being to do things your way. And the mind thinks if I can just get my sensual desires fulfilled and I can kind of fear this person into doing things my way through my hostility and bitterness, then I'll be getting what I want and everything will be okay. But it won't be because your sensual desire is still in there. You haven't actually eliminated that. So when this ill will is arising and you're being bitter and harsh and hostile, you're still damaging your relationships and you're going to experience the results of that. Or you might put your expectations on someone. When you're experiencing those painful feelings, when people aren't doing things your way, when your sensual desire isn't getting fulfilled, you might try to control people and force them to do things your way, thinking that that's going to solve the problem. But what the mind's doing is it's just trying to get its sensual desires fulfilled. And it doesn't realize that what this real problem is. So we're not born with this ill will in our mind. It forms over time because our sensual desires aren't getting fulfilled. So more and more this ill will becomes deeply rooted in the mind. because we didn't go into the nursery at the hospital when we were born hating other babies, right? We didn't have aggression and hostility and bitterness as a child. This is why a child is so happy-go-lucky and so cheerful and bright, because their mind hasn't had time to accumulate a lot of conditioning. But as we grew up and we didn't get that chocolate and ice cream, that's where the ill will came in. Or we didn't get that favorite toy that we wanted. Or maybe our brothers or sisters or our parents broke our toys by accident, and now we got angry at them because our central desires weren't getting fulfilled. And now more and more that ill will started to be formed in the mind, where now there's this deeply rooted container in the mind where this bitterness and hostility can come out at any point if the mind's not getting what it wants. So you can actually transform all of this. You can essentially rewire the mind where you no longer have central desire, where you're not chasing and longing and yearning, but you're also not on the other side where you're just indifferent and could care less what's happening in your life. But instead, you come to this middle way where you're gradually pursuing certain goals, objectives, or interests. And if you accomplish that thing, great. But if you don't accomplish it, that's fine too. And you just kind of decide what to do from there. But you don't allow that ill will to come into the mind, and you don't treat others in bitter and harsh and hostile ways. And all of this that I'm talking about, it occurs through gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. You can't learn something like this and snap your fingers and go out into the world and just experience improvement. You're going to need to be able to, have this gradual training and gradual practice and gradual progress. That's why it takes multiple years to get to enlightenment. So these aren't a bunch of beliefs that you're believing and you just instantly snap your fingers and go out into the world and start doing these things. You're going to need tools and techniques of how to uproot these out of the mind. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you. And this is why it's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And as you're gradually reducing these fetters, that's where you'll see gradual improvements to the condition of your mind. And you'll start seeing more and more brightness and radiance and cheerfulness coming through in the mind. So I'm going to pause here and see what questions you guys might have about these lower fetters. And then we're going to go into the higher fetters and talk about those as well. You can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So it looks like Marcy has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. Would it be beneficial for the mind to think of this mind and body together as a temporary self or an impermanent self or being?
It's important to not think of there being any self whatsoever. The way that I think about it is you're basically renting this body. This body doesn't belong to you. You're just renting it for the time being. And you'd like to take care of it. You'd like to be a very good renter, right? You'd like to clean it up. You'd like to, take care of it, make sure it's healthy. But you're essentially renting this body. It's a temporary thing that this mind is now here and part of this body, but this body doesn't belong to you because you're going to need to leave it at some point. So rather than think about it as a temporary self, just think about it as kind of like an empty vessel that is basically containing the mind, and that this body doesn't belong to you, that you're going to need to leave it because it's impermanent.
Thank you, Teacher David.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So I'm going to move into the higher fetters and talk about these. These won't take as long to discuss because, in my opinion, they're actually a lot more straightforward, where personal existence view is sometimes a bit challenging for people to understand when they first get introduced to it. And if that's the case, no worries, because you're going to have plenty of time to learn this throughout our group learning program. But here, I'll talk about number 6 and 7 together because they're very similar. This is desire for form and desire for formless. This is where an individual has craving, desire, attachment for existence in the world, where you might want to exist in the animal realm or the human realm. This is the form realms. Or you might have a desire to exist in one of the formless realms, like hell, afflicted spirits, or heavenly realm. Now remember, none of the teachings of the Buddha are based in belief, so even these realms of existence can actually be independently verified. You might not have the wisdom of how to do that right now, but as you progress in your journey, you'll learn how to independently verify all of these realms of existence. So the hell realm, the afflicted spirit realm, which is like ghosts, and the heavenly realm, this is all formless realms. And beings exist in these realms, but it's not desirable. But if you have a desire for existence in the world, then your mind's still holding on and you want to come back into the world. There's people who have desire to be in the animal realm or the human realm, or even people have desire to exist in the hell realm or the afflicted spirits. There's a lot of people who have a desire to exist in heaven because they think heaven is a permanent existence, and they don't realize that it's not permanent. Because if you look around the world, you can see the universal truth of impermanence, that things are constantly changing and nothing in the world around you is permanent, including the heavenly realm. So if you've been taught that the heavenly realm is permanent, you can actually see the truth that there is a universal truth of impermanence and that the heavenly realm is not actually permanent. Even places that teach that the heavenly realm is permanent, they talk about beings that have been kicked out of this realm. So the realm of heaven is not a permanent existence, but oftentimes people have this craving or this desire to exist in the world. And because of that, they might actually have fear of death. When they're getting close to death, this can be very painful to experience because they're holding on to the world so tightly and they don't want to leave. They realize that, whoa, they're getting close to death and it's really hard for them. So if you can get to the point where you don't have desire for form and you don't have desire to exist in the formless realm, then you can get to a point where you don't have fear of death. So you need to get to the point where you don't have craving for existence, but you also don't have craving for non-existence either. This would be like wanting to commit suicide, right? If you have craving for either side of this, either existence or non-existence, then the mind can't be peaceful in the present moment. You need to get to the point where in the present moment, there's peacefulness and joy, that you don't long and yearn for some existence after this, but you also don't long and yearn to end this existence either, so that you can be peaceful and joyful in the present moment. So there's methods to be able to help you to be able to eradicate desire for form and desire for formless, and ultimately get to the point where you have no fear of death whatsoever. Then there's something called conceit. This is part of the ego. This is the arrogance, the pride, the judging, the measuring and comparing, putting yourself above people or below people. You're going to need to eliminate this. This is going to produce difficulties and struggles in your life. Because when you go out into the world and you're arrogant and prideful and you're judging other people and you're putting yourself above people or below people, you'll interact with people in a different way. And then as people observe that ego and that arrogance, they will push you aside, not being interested in being around you. Where you might kind of talk down to certain people and you might talk up to other people, where like maybe you go into your boss's office and you need to talk to them about some project that you're involved in, and now you're all shaken up in that situation, and now your boss doesn't have confidence that you can actually execute this project in the way that you need to, where you might have full wisdom and full understanding how to execute this project, but when you go into your boss's office, you might have difficulties communicating it because you're conceit. You're measuring and comparing yourself. You're putting this person above you, or you're putting yourself, above them. And now when you're communicating, now you have a difficult time communicating in that situation. Or maybe you go to a social event and you're looking for this pecking order of where are you in this pecking order amongst all these people? Because where this is coming from, this conceit, is it's coming from your existences in your animal life. Like before your human existence, you've had countless existences in the animal realm. And in the animal realm, we needed conceit. If it wasn't for conceit, we wouldn't have been able to survive. That when we were a pack of wolves, we needed to know who's the alpha male and the alpha female, because they're breeding and they're teaching us how to hunt. They're teaching us how to survive. And if we didn't know how to learn from the alpha male and alpha female, we wouldn't have been able to learn how to be a better and better wolf. We wouldn't have been able to survive as a pack. Or when we were a herd of elephants, we needed to know who's the matriarch of our herd, because she's going to show us where's the migration paths, where do we get food from, where do we get water from, where's our watering holes. If we didn't know who the matriarch of our herd was, who was above us, we wouldn't have survived as an elephant. So we needed this conceit in the animal realm. But now in the human realm, we don't need this conceit anymore. If we put ourselves above people or below people, then this is just going to cause difficulties in our life. And you'd like to get to the point where you're not judging other people and you just are humble, where you understand that people perform different roles, but that doesn't make them above you. So a president or prime minister of a country, they're not above somebody else. this taxi driver or the person who cleans up the streets, they're not above that person. They're just performing a different role. Just like we like to have leaders of our countries who are making wise decisions, we like to have clean streets too. And we like to have nice taxi drivers who take us around and give us transportation as well. And these people are all equal. Now, other people might be putting themselves above or below each other, but your mind needs to get to the point where you don't see yourself as being above or below people, because this is actually harming your own mind. When you're looking at other people and you're judging them, it's causing harm to your own mind, and you'd like to get rid of this conceit and just consider yourself as being equal to everybody, that everybody is just equal. And now you can talk with people with ease. Because if you have this pecking order in your mind where you talk down to some people and you talk up to other people, when you're in a mixed group of people, you'll find it very difficult to communicate in this situation, because you're having to figure out, how do I talk to this person? How do I talk to that person? Because I'm above this person and I'm below this person. And I need to change the way that I talk in these situations. But the way that your mind gets to ease is you just treat everybody equally. You use the wisdom of the moral conduct section of the Eightfold Path, and you just treat everybody equally. And this is what's going to help you to eliminate your conceit. And there's other things that we're going to talk about related to the ego. It's so important to eliminate this, and it's also so challenging that by the time we get to chapter 16, we're going to spend an entire class period talking about the ego and what it is and how to actually eliminate it through proactive training. Then the number 9, this is restlessness. This is where the mind is confused, distracted, worried. It's a restless state of mind. This is the opposite of concentration and singleness of mind. You might notice that your knee is bobbing up and down, or that you tap your finger a lot, or that you tap a pencil. This is because the mind is overactive and you're having obsessive thoughts, and now it's coming through in the body. And there's restlessness in the mind, and then it comes through in the body as well. So you can get to a point where you don't have these obsessive thoughts and the mind is overactive, where there's stillness and quietness in the mind. But as long as this restlessness, this overactivity is in the mind, then the mind isn't at ease. So you would like to have a point where the mind is calm and tranquil, where there's equanimity and calmness and composure in the mind. And you can eliminate this restlessness through training of the mind. And then the fetter of all fetters, number 10, it's translated as ignorance, but I tend to not use that word because I know the Buddha didn't use that particular word, but this is how other teachers use this word. So I use it so you can see where it plugs into other people's teachings. But a better way to think about this is the unknowing of true reality, because a Buddha doesn't talk in a negative, degrading, and diminishing way. And if we called somebody ignorant, this is like degrading and diminishing that person. But a better way to think about this is a lack of wisdom, where the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. It has confusion or misunderstanding or misperception that has this unknowing of true reality. Because of the ignorance, the mind continues to have these fetters in the mind, because the mind just lacks wisdom of things like sensual desire, that you don't even know that that's a problem. You lack wisdom that the mind has this ill will, this anger, this hatred, this bitterness towards others. You lack wisdom of something like conceit and the ego and the arrogance, because if you're around people with a lot of conceit and they're functioning that way, you might think that that's a normal way to function, and your mind might just be conforming to that. So the mind is unknowing of true reality of these natural laws of existence. There's certain natural laws that the Buddha taught that are affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. And if you lack wisdom of these natural laws, you'll go out into the world and make unwise decisions that are leading to unwholesome results. Just like we had a lack of wisdom of the natural law of gravity, and we went out into the world and made unwise decisions about those, and now we fell down, we hurt ourselves, we broke our toys. The same thing is true that when you struggled and had difficulties with the natural law of gravity, there's certain natural laws that you have struggles and difficulties with. So that's where the teachings of the Buddha are all about cultivation of wisdom. The Buddha isn't teaching you the way the world should be, and that there's a bunch of rules and commandments that if everybody follows these, then the world will become a more peaceful place. Instead, he's teaching you the way the world is, that when you live in a world that you don't understand, you will have struggles and you'll have difficulties. This is why you might look at the news and you might say, I just don't understand why those people keep doing that. I just don't understand. Or you might hear something about your brothers or sisters or your mom or dad, and you're just like, I don't understand why they keep doing that. I just don't understand them, right? This is because the mind has this lack of wisdom. It just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. So these natural laws are there to help you to understand. The teachings of the Buddha are going to describe these natural laws for you. And then you learn them, examine them, and investigate them. You reflect on them to independently verify them. And then you practice. And that's where you see the truth. And you gain this wisdom. And as you're gaining this wisdom, you're transforming this ignorance. The mind is now becoming wiser and wiser. You start learning that being bitter, harsh, and hostile, for example, and you're putting that out, it's just going to come back to you. And you can see the truth in that throughout your life. And then as you gain more and more wisdom of how to function in the world wisely, and you start doing that, then you're going to see more and more wholesome results for you. So you're going to need to learn things like the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, the things that are wholesome and unwholesome, these unwholesome roots and these wholesome roots. You're going to need to learn the natural law of Gotama, the cycle of rebirth. All these things are things that you gain wisdom about. Because right now, if you're experiencing anger or frustration or annoyment or stress or anxiety or any of these other feelings, there's a certain amount of ignorance in the mind. And the way you eradicate this ignorance is not through intellectual learning alone. There is a certain amount of intellectual learning that you need, but the way that you eradicate this ignorance is, yes, you start with intellectual learning through investigating and examining the teachings. But then as you move through your reflection to independently verify it, you actually practice the teachings. Through practice of the teachings, this is where you see the real transformation, and that's where the real wisdom is cultivated. So, for example, we might have intellectually known at some point in our life that it's unwise to use drugs and alcohol. We intellectually understood that, but we still made the choice to actually use drugs and alcohol. And that's because of our ignorance, our unknowing of true reality. We don't realize how much harm we were doing to this body and how much harm we were doing in our life, in our relationships. So when you fully cultivate wisdom, it's not just that you intellectually understand the teachings, it's that you actually are practicing the teachings on a day-to-day basis. So if you see the truth, how unwise it is to ingest substances, for example, then you'll know and you'll practice in such a way that you're making the choices not to use those things. And that's where the ignorance is actually eradicated, is through your practice. But you need to start with the intellectual learning. So these are the 10 fetters, kind of as an introduction to be able to help you understand what they are. And we talked a little bit about the solutions here and there, but we're going to get into a lot more detail on that throughout the entire program. So I'm going to see if you guys have questions here about any of these, and then we're going to move into talking about the 4 stages of enlightenment and things like that. So if you have questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So Mike has a question here in Zoom. He says, a better way to understand the word ignorance is to look at the root of the word, which is ignore. We ignore parts of reality that don't align with what the ego wants to see. Okay, Mike, if that's what you would like to think, I would encourage you to ask questions rather than make statements like that. But I understand what you're saying there. I would just encourage you to ask questions, because if you just make statements like this, they could be unwise, it could be untrue, and it might actually mislead you and mislead other people as well. Let me see if we have any questions anywhere else. All right, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So let's talk about the 4 stages of enlightenment, because as you're eliminating these fetters, your mind's going to move through these 4 stages. I refer to them as the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stage of enlightenment, where the mind is actually enlightened when you're in the 4th stage of enlightenment. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, and even now, people use these phrases or these terms that distinguish the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th stage of enlightenment. And it does help to understand these, because you'll hear other people talking about it. So the 1st stage of enlightenment, people refer to as a stream enterer, because once you get to the 1st stage of enlightenment, you're going to get to enlightenment. It's just a matter of time. Either in this life or some future life, you're going to get to enlightenment. And it's called a stream enterer because once the log enters the stream, it will get to the ocean. It's just a matter of time. So that's why it's referred to as a stream enterer. And once you're in that 1st stage, your mind won't regress backwards from there. All the way up until the 1st stage of enlightenment, if your mind is at any point in its progress, like even if you're in the jhanas, if you become complacent, your mind will regress out of those jhanas and your mind will go backwards. But once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you won't actually regress at that point. So we refer to it as a stream enter because there's only forward progress. Then there's a once returner, a non-returner, and an arahant. This is the way they refer to an enlightened being. So I'm going to explain to you what these are, and then we're going to talk about what a Buddha is. And then I'll just open up to questions you guys have in class at that point. So here, a stream enter is an individual who's eliminated the first 3 fetters. If someone's eliminated personal existence view, doubts, and wrong behavior and observances, their mind is in the first stage of enlightenment. And there's other teachings that you need in order to be able to help you to accomplish this. So it's not just purely eliminating these fetters. This is the big indication that you're in the first stage, but there are certain teachings that you need to have learned and understood and be practicing in order to be able to get the mind to have eliminated these first 3 fetters. So that's why you need to know the Eightfold Path and a lot of other things. There's actually a retreat that I teach each January that teaches everything you need in those 5 days to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. And getting to the first stage of enlightenment is kind of like being at base camp at Mount Everest, that you've already done a lot of preliminary work. You haven't just stumbled into base camp in Mount Everest, right? Somebody has intentionally made decisions to test certain equipment, go on various hikes, learn different things, and they are now firmly at base camp. They have the opportunity to get to the summit. They haven't done it yet, but they have everything they need. They have all the equipment and all the knowledge that they need to be able to now make their way to the summit. So that's the way you can think about the stream enter, that you're at base camp with the potential to now be able to actually get to enlightenment itself. So there's various teachings that you need, and that's why I have one retreat that is everything you need to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. And that retreat is taught here in Chiang Mai, but it's also live streamed and it's recorded, so you can learn from that particular retreat. And if you die in the first stage of enlightenment, you will return back into the human realm, no more than 7 times. Because at this point, you're functioning more and more as a human being. The unenlightened mind functions very much like an animal. This is why some people think human beings are animals, but we're not animals. We're actually human beings. But the unenlightened mind is functioning very much like an animal because we're coming out of the animal realm, a lot of us. So as you develop your mind and cultivate the mind and you evolve to this better and better human being, when your mind is in that first stage of enlightenment, you're functioning as a better and better human being. And you'll see that if you die in that stage, that you'll come back into the world as a human being. In there, you have another opportunity to now be able to get to enlightenment. You're not reborn as a stream enterer. You still have all the 10 fetters, but because of your previous training in a previous life, you have a better opportunity to get back to stream entry in that next life. And you will get back to that stream entry in your next life. And then you can even go beyond that. So it's not that you have to be reborn 7 times. It's that there's the potential that you will be reborn up to a maximum of 7 times. So some of you guys might have actually been stream enters in your previous life. And now you're working your way back to that in this life. And then maybe you're even going to go beyond that in this particular life as well. So that's what the first stage of enlightenment is. And in this stage of enlightenment, your discontentedness has significantly reduced. Whatever you were experiencing in terms of discontentedness in your previous time, like when you were off the path to enlightenment, or even when you first got on the path to enlightenment, by the time you get to this first stage of enlightenment, your discontentedness is a mere fraction of what it once was, that you will have seen this significant decrease in discontentedness. You're no longer experiencing this rage or this high amounts of anger and frustration and stress and anxiety that's really tempered and kind of come to the middle a bit. Then from there, if somebody is thinning out number 4 and 5, their sensual desire and ill will, the mind is now in the second stage of enlightenment because they've already eliminated the personal existence view, doubts, and wrong behavior and observances. So if you're noticing, for example, that you're less and less interested in sex, this is because your sensual desire is starting to wane. Because if you think back to when we were children, we had a lot of sensual desire. We really wanted chocolate and ice cream. And if we got chocolate or ice cream like 3, 4, 5 times a day, that was the best day ever. And boy, we could do that every single day. We just enjoyed it so much. But then we got to the point where we're like, If we have chocolate and ice cream, it's okay, but we don't long and yearn for it the way that we did as a child because our sensual desire decreased, right? So if you're noticing your interest in sexual activity is decreasing, you're not a bad person. It doesn't mean your relationship's falling apart. It doesn't mean you're less of a man or anything like this. It doesn't mean you're less attractive or anything like that. It's just like, yeah, you just kind of like been there, done that. You've seen that enough times and you've experienced what you experienced, and now you're just not as interested in it anymore. And you don't need to define who you are as a person through whether or not you're having sex or not. And you don't need to define your relationship through whether or not you're having sex or not. So you might notice that your interest in sexual activity starts to decrease as you're making your way into the second stage of enlightenment. And then because of your sensual desire decreasing and you have less and less cravings, you're going to have less ill will as well. You're going to have less bitterness and harshness and hostility. So your discontentedness, once again, moving from the first stage of enlightenment to the second stage, is going to reduce even more because you're now thinning out some of your cravings, desires, attachments. And if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you will come back into the human realm one more time, and you will experience enlightenment in that next life. That's why it's referred to as a once returner, because you've now developed the mind to a certain degree, and you'll come back into the human realm one more time. So some of you, once again, could have been a once returner in your last life. And now's your opportunity to get to enlightenment, that you need to work your way back up to the once returner. And then from there, you'll make your way further into the actual enlightened mental state where the mind's completely purified. Then the third stage of enlightenment is called a non-returner. This is where you've eliminated the 5 lower fetters: personal existence view, doubt, wrong behavior and observances, sensual desire, and ill will. It's all been completely eliminated from the mind, and you're experiencing very minimal discontentedness at this point. Maybe once every 2 months, once every 3, 4, 5, 6 months. You're experiencing a little bit of ickiness. It's very infrequent and it's very insignificant when it occurs. It might be like for 30 seconds or like maybe a couple of seconds, and the mind basically deals with it and you move on. And it's so infrequent that the mind can sometimes become complacent in this stage of enlightenment because you're very rarely experiencing any discontentedness. So you need to stay very vigilant and diligent during this time frame, because you can go sometimes 2, 3, 4 months where everything's so peaceful and joyful, but then boom, here comes some discontentedness that you need to deal with. And it, like I mentioned, it's very insignificant when it's occurring and you can take care of it right away, but there is still some residual clinging and craving that is there that you need to eliminate out of the mind. So if you're noticing that, and you just need to make sure that you stay dedicated and diligent. Now, if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you will be reborn into the heavenly realm, and you will attain enlightenment in that realm in your very next existence. You're still in the cycle of rebirth in that heavenly realm, but you will actually attain enlightenment from there. Then if you progress further and you eliminate all the 10 fetters, this is where the mind is actually enlightened. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, it was referred to as an arahant, that the mind is completely purified. Today, we might refer to this person as an enlightened being, where during the lifetime of the Buddha, it was referred to as an arahant. And this is someone who's completely purified their mind. They don't experience any discontentedness whatsoever. For 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you'll see that you're not experiencing any discontentedness, not even the slightest little ickiness. The mind's bright and uplifted. You're joyful, you're cheerful. You're not even in a bad mood anymore, that the mind is just focused and concentrated, having clarity at all times. You'll notice that your personal, professional relationships are really blossoming and that you don't have difficulties and struggles in the world any longer, because your mind is fully awake to all the natural laws of existence. And when you navigate the world and you're making decisions and you're experiencing things in the world, you can just navigate the world with ease, that you fully awoke to all the natural laws and the mind's fully purified. So this is what's called an arahant, or an enlightened being. And then lastly, there's an individual that's referred to as a Buddha, or a fully perfectly enlightened one. This is very rare in the world, and it doesn't exist very frequently. The last one that the world's currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. A person who is a Buddha, or a fully perfectly enlightened one, they are an arahant. They've purified their mind of the 10 fetters, but they've done it in a very unique way, in that they've done it by themselves, without the help of any teachers or any guides. that everyone else who gets to enlightenment, they're going to need teachers and guides. They're going to need help. They're going to need guidance for somebody to help them along the path. But for an individual who's gotten to enlightenment by themselves, without the help of any teachers or any guides, this individual is prepared to actually be a Buddha. But they need to meet these other criteria as well. They will end up declaring their teachings and sharing their teachings for the rest of their life. From the time that they get to enlightenment until they die, they will share their independently discovered teachings with countless people. And countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. And then they will preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So these are the three primary criteria of what make a Buddha, is that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after that person's death. And this is what Gotama Buddha, he essentially meets these criteria. So the last Buddha that the world's currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. Then the thing that allows an individual to do this is that a Buddha, or a person who is going to become a Buddha, has a mind that functions a bit differently than the average human being. That you have a certain capacity in your mind. It's kind of like a hard drive where you might have 500 megabytes or 500 gigabytes or a terabyte or something like this. You have a certain capacity of memory. And then as you experience new things in life, you need to delete old files in order to store new files. So like in the last 5 or 10 years or so, you can pretty much remember the various things that you've been involved in and what you've done. But if you go back to your childhood, you just have kind of spotty memories because you've had to delete old files in order to store new files. This isn't the way that a person who's going to become a Buddha, it's not the way that their mind functions. They have an unlimited capacity in their mind where they can remember countless details about their current life and their previous lives as well. And they accumulate wisdom over multiple lifetimes, and they bring that together in their last life to be able to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. So they have a profound memory to be able to then apply that wisdom that they've accumulated, and that's what allows them to get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They can also quickly determine the condition of somebody else's mind through observing the way that they interact in the world. Essentially, they understand the fetters really well, and they can see the fetters in other people's minds. And when someone's interacting with them, they can see the conceit, they can see the sensual desire, they can see the ill will, they can see these things. And then when that student is interested in learning, they can actually provide them teachings and guidance to be able to help them to eliminate their conceit or their sensual desire or their ill will. So an individual who's a Buddha can actually observe the condition of someone else's mind and then provide them teachings that is going to actually help them. But they only do that when that individual is soliciting the teachings. They don't just kind of show up in that person's life and give them unsolicited teachings, that they're actually sharing teachings with an individual who's requesting those teachings. And then lastly, one of the criteria of what makes a Buddha is that they're a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. Whatever they teach, they're going to be practicing that as well. They're not going to be teaching one thing and then practicing something completely different. So if they're teaching things like right speech, they're going to be practicing right speech as well, because they're wise enough to understand that their students are learning through their spoken words, but they're learning just as much through their actions as well. That a Buddha is going to be functioning in the world as an enlightened being, and their students are learning from that. So it's important that a Buddha is going to actually be practicing the exact same things that they're teaching. So you'll see this connection and this integration, that whatever they're actually teaching, that's what they're practicing too. They're like a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. They're a role model for other people to be able to observe and then practice those teachings in the same exact way. So I'm going to stop here and see what questions you guys might have about anything that I've been describing. You can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comments section, or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any and all questions that you like. I see a question coming in here on YouTube. Let's see what this person's saying. Is there any signs that someone in this life is already in the first stage of enlightenment from past life, but they are not learning Buddhism? Is it possible? So it's not that you die in the first stage of enlightenment and then when you're born, you actually are in that stage of enlightenment. An individual would need to have still learned and developed on the path in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. But they're going to find it to be a bit easier. There's some people who progress on the path very slowly, so to speak. And not that we're in a race or in a competition, but it just takes them sometimes 5, 10, 15, even 20 years even to get to the first stage of enlightenment. But there's other people who progress a little bit more readily, where within a matter of 6 months or a year, even 2 years, they can get into the first stage of enlightenment. And this individual is someone who was potentially learning and practicing these teachings in a previous life. So the things that I would notice about someone who's in the first stage of enlightenment is that they don't have that personal existence view, they don't have doubts, and they don't have wrong behavior and observances, that they have a certain level of moral conduct. They understand that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship doesn't lead to enlightenment. They don't have doubt about the teachings of the Buddha. They will know with 100% certainty and confirmed confidence that the Buddhist teachings are leading to an improved condition of mind. And they won't have that personal existence view, that they won't get agitated or frustrated or annoyed related to the self-image or the self-identity. They won't be identifying with anything here that is themselves. So if I ask somebody like, can you point to yourself? If somebody's like, I'm right here, right away, they still have personal existence view. So these are things that, I can observe in people, but it's important that each individual person figures this out for themselves. You need to be able to learn enough about the path to enlightenment and the progression on the path to enlightenment that you know yourself whether or not you're in the first, second, third, or fourth stage of enlightenment or somewhere else on your journey. Because these stages of enlightenment, it's nothing to be boastful and arrogant about. It's essentially a personal development plan that the Buddha is showing you, hey, this is what you need to focus on. So the path to enlightenment isn't about trying to determine whether somebody else is in any particular stage, but understanding what you need to do in order to get to any particular stage of enlightenment. So what I would encourage you to do is focus on developing the Eightfold Path, the way that I teach it through all the resources that I share, and training your mind to get into the jhanas. And now when you're in the jhanas, start focusing on the fetters so that your mind can firmly get into that first stage of enlightenment. And you'll notice that if you're in that first stage of enlightenment, that you won't have personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances. You'll also understand things like dependent origination. You'll understand the 5 aggregates. You'll understand the 6 sense bases. You'll have accomplishment in view, accomplishment in generosity, and things like this. And these are all things that I teach in the January retreat. So if you're noticing that you have selfishness and you have a hard time to share, you're not yet in the first stage of enlightenment. A person who's in the first stage of enlightenment can easily share with other people. If you don't understand dependent origination and what this teaching is and what it's communicating and why it's important and how to dismantle it, you're not yet in the first stage of enlightenment. If you don't understand the 6 sense bases and what that is, or the 5 aggregates, what those are, if you don't understand these kinds of things, then your mind's not yet in the first stage of enlightenment, because it's not just elimination of these 3 fetters, but you need to understand these teachings and be practicing them as well. And that's why I spend an entire retreat helping people to understand what those are and how to practice them. Okay, let me see if we have any questions on Facebook. I don't see anything there. Looks like Leo has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, David. Could you maybe go back to the last page? You said that the Buddha can quickly determine the condition of the mind of other person and so on. And the last one also, Buddha will have a deep practice of their own teachings. Is it the same with enlightened beings? I think there's a difference, right? But enlightened beings, I mean, if they learn the teachings of the Buddha, I think they also must be a breathing example of the teachings, right? And they might also determine the condition of the mind of another person. Or is there a big difference between the Buddha and the enlightened being?
No, they can actually do these same things too, but they won't have these first 4. They will still have a deep memory, but they won't be able to have an unlimited memory. So it's these first four, and the number 5 and 6, that makes a Buddha a Buddha. Because as you say, an enlightened being will be able to do number 5 and 6 as well.
Okay, and maybe some of them also have a really good memory from a lot of past lives, or is it very different to the Buddhas?
It's different. They will have a certain healthy memory. Like, in order to get to enlightenment, you need to actually remember the teachings and be practicing them. You would have purified your mind of the pollutions. So your mind is performing well, and you have a deep memory as an enlightened being, but you don't have the same level of memory as a person who's an actual Buddha. And you might even, as an enlightened being, have recall of your past lives to a certain level of detail, but not to the same level of detail as an actual Buddha. They will have a deep, 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 profound memory of their past lives and what they were doing in those lives and what wisdom that they acquired in those lives. And then in their current life too, they will understand countless details about their existing life as well. And that's all the wisdom that comes together to allow them to then share the teachings in the way that they do and actually get to enlightenment as well.
An enlightened being, okay, some of them might have a lot of memories from the past lives, but I think there's also like maybe they can't look back 5 million years in the past. Is it like that? Is it more like the past 4 or 5 beings' existences? They can look back on that, but after more and more they go to past experiences, it's more difficult for them? Or
they will just have some light memories, some residual memories of their past lives, but they won't understand exactly what they were doing, what wisdom that they encountered, how those lives ended necessarily. But an individual who's a Buddha will understand lots of details about their current life and their previous lives. It's not to the level of depth that a Buddha has, that what an enlightened being is experiencing.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, so Marcy, you have a question? Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. Personal existence view seems to be something that eliminating, and I know that there is a meditation particularly for it, and I am interested in trying this meditation. But is there anything that you would recommend to me before I begin trying this meditation?
Be sure that you have the Eightfold Path really well underway, and you have breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation really well underway, and practice that really well. And be sure that you're doing those proactive things aside from the meditation to eliminate personal existence view. And that's where you'll have the most success with that meditation. Whereas if you didn't have those things on board, then you wouldn't be as successful with that meditation.
Would it be beneficial then for me to wait for my personal discussion with you so that we can see what the mind has retained before I decide to start doing this meditation?
It's up to you. There's no harm in doing the meditation. It's just a matter of what's going to produce the most benefits. Whereas if like somebody on their first day on the path to enlightenment started doing that meditation, the mind hasn't yet got to the point where it's even ready to release things yet. So it's not going to really be helpful. So it's not that it's going to harm that person. It's just that it's not going to be as beneficial. So you could do it a few times and even see how's it working and how's it affecting you, because then you'll have more insight when we have our personal discussion.
Thank you, teacher. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Fiona has a question here. She says, hi, teacher. In the heavenly realm, are there teachers to help unenlightened heavenly beings to progress on the path to enlightenment? The answer is yes. There are individuals who were learning the teachings at some other points, and now they're in the heavenly realm and they're actually learning there. But there's also accounts in the Pali Canon, the original source teachings of the Buddha, where heavenly beings were coming to the Buddha to be able to learn. Because while we call these things realms, and we oftentimes think of them as being really far away, like heavenly realms far up in the sky, or the hell realm is down in the core of the earth, in reality, these beings are all within the same time and space. So right now, there could be heavenly beings listening to me speak and teaching these teachings. And I wouldn't necessarily know that necessarily, but they are actually learning. So they can actually learn from human beings as well as beings in the heavenly realm. And then she goes on, also, does a Buddha help beings in the heavenly realm on the path to enlightenment, or do they only share the teachings with beings in the human realm? So yeah, I just answered that as well as part of that particular answer. So yeah, Buddha does help heavenly beings, but it's up to those heavenly beings to come and learn, even human beings, right? A Buddha doesn't just in an unsolicited way push themselves into people's lives and start telling them the teachings. It's up to each individual to choose to step forward, because there's 1,000,001 decisions that each being has to make in order to get to enlightenment. And if they're not willing to even take the first step of picking up a book or tuning into a class or asking a teacher questions, there's no way they're going to make all those other decisions to meditate and do all the other things that they need to do. So a Buddha and an enlightened being, a teacher who's sharing these teachings, will only teach individuals who request teachings. And even in that situation, if the individual is being disrespectful and angry and bitter and harsh, that person might choose after a period of time to actually not even teach that person. The Buddha actually would in some situations stop teaching somebody if they weren't taking heed to his guidance and they weren't actually progressing on the path, that he would get to a point where he would just ignore them and he wouldn't actually teach them any longer. So it's important that as you're learning, that you learn to be polite and friendly and respectful. And this is part of your practice. And a teacher understands when their students first come to them, they're not necessarily going to have that wisdom. And they might function with arrogance or ego or conceit or bitterness or harshness. So a teacher will be patient. An enlightened being who's a teacher, they'll be patient with their students. But then eventually there does become a time where if the person's just not making progress and they're not choosing to learn and practice, that a teacher might actually choose not to teach them. But a Buddha would teach heavenly beings and humans, but only when those people are coming and requesting teachings. So it looks like Marcy has some more questions. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, teacher. Real quick, you had said that, we all share the same time and space as heavenly beings, hell beings, inflicted spirits. Our animals that are around us. Now, obviously, I have chosen to have animals in my home. I'm not going to add to my pack here, but is it beneficial for these animals? Have they acquired some kind of good karma to be homed in a home where someone is practicing the Buddha's teachings? Will this eventually or maybe play any part in perpetuating them into a human realm?
Yes, that's one of the reasons why we see the human realm expanding the way that we do, because we're more and more spending time with animals, and humans are training them and helping them to become more domesticated. That's what we call it. But essentially, they're getting training. And now those dogs and those cats, they're not outside, they're not killing, they're not stealing for their food. So their mind is cultivating a certain amount of love and kindness and compassion. They can't get to enlightenment in that animal existence, but they have produced a certain amount of wholesome karma to be in an environment where they have an opportunity to cultivate their mind to a certain degree. But they would only cultivate that mind with the help of a human. If they were turned out on the street, they would basically resort to their animalistic instincts, and they wouldn't be able to experience the same beneficial results that they experience from being in the home of a human. So they've experienced a certain amount of wholesome karma to be able to end up in a home like this. And now in their next life, their life will just improve as they go forward from there, that they'll experience improved rebirth from this existence to their next existence. Okay, so we have another question coming in on YouTube. How were you able to see your past life? So this must be a person that understands that I've seen my past lives. So the way that this happens is it happens through cleaning out your mind and eliminating pollution out of your mind. And as you do, you'll have the potential to be able to observe your past lives. I had the very first residual memory of a past life when I was 8 years old. And then all throughout my life, I had various memories of my past lives. But it wasn't until I was about 44, kind of around that time frame, 43, 44, that I started getting really profound memories. Because this is when I started training my mind. This was like 2017, 2018. I was dabbling before, but I didn't really know what I was doing. But when I got into like 2017, 2018, that's when I was really actively working on the mind and actively working to get to enlightenment. And that's where I had really deep, profound memories. So it's through eradicating your pollution. It's kind of like if you went outside of your house, you would just see what's on your street because you're just stepping outside your house. But when you move to a higher vantage point up on the mountain, you can see how all these streets and all these towns interconnect because you have this higher vantage point. So when you're getting rid of the pollution out of your mind, it's like moving to this higher consciousness where you have this higher vantage point. And now from this higher vantage point, you're able to now see more of what you're experiencing in this life and in your previous lives as well, where oftentimes we just kind of look at the last couple of days or the last couple of weeks that we're involved in something. But when you're starting to move to this higher vantage point, you kind of look over the course of your life and you start cultivating more wisdom of what's going on in this life. But also, as you're eliminating that pollution, you can observe things that were going on in previous lives as well. And this is just a result of having trained the mind. You can't really induce the observance of your past lives, and it's really unwise to even try to do that, because if you try to induce the observance of your past lives, you're not going to really know whether that's true or false because you're trying to force it. Instead, just focus on the Eightfold Path, focus on training your mind, focus on getting rid of these fetters. And if you're going to see and experience memories from your past lives, then it's just going to happen. You don't have to force it in order for this to occur. And if you ever observe your past lives, it's unwise to go out and just kind of boast and blab about that. So the only reason why I've talked about having observed past lives is because students ask me these questions. And then when they ask me the questions, I just answer them like, yes, I've experienced this. But you won't see me out on the street corner, oh, by the way, guess what? I used to do this in the past, or I was in these existences in the past. That would be like arrogance and boastfulness, right? So if you have these experiences, you can just keep them to yourself and just know for yourself. But there's some people who will get to enlightenment that will never observe their past lives. Not every single being that gets to enlightenment will observe their past lives. So you can get to enlightenment without observing your past lives. But you will need to confirm the cycle of rebirth. And there's multiple ways to do that, even without having seen your past lives. So there's guidance that I provide you in the various classes and courses and retreats and in the books about how to use the wisdom to actually independently verify the cycle of rebirth. But in doing so, you may or may not actually see your past lives. And that's not required in order to get to enlightenment. Okay, so excellent questions, guys. And thank you for your questions. I don't see any more anywhere else. So what I'm going to do is just end class by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your questions and your interest to learn the path to enlightenment. As you would like to learn more, you're more than welcome to attend these classes, because now we're basically at the point in our group learning program where next week I'm going to start chapter 1 from our book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. So if you'd like to read the preface and or chapter 1, you can actually start from the very beginning of this book, and you can acquire this from our website by downloading it from buddhadailywisdom.com. You'll get it for free. You'll be able to go print it if you like. You can get printed versions using Amazon, or you can get these at the temple here in Chiang Mai by just reimbursing us for the printing cost, because you'd like to be able to read the book and come to the classes, because there's certain things in the classes that aren't in the book. And there's certain things in the book that aren't in the classes. So now, all the way through the end of the group learning program, I'm going to be going chapter by chapter each individual week. Still doing meditation, but then I'm going to teach that particular chapter. So if you've either read before or after class, it'll really help you to come to a full understanding of the teachings and be able to then practice them through your independent verification of the teachings. As you guys have questions, you can ask those in classes. You can post on our Facebook group. You can send me private messages, or you can schedule personal guidance through our website, and then we can meet in Zoom one-on-one, and I'll be able to help you. So perhaps I'll see you guys in our future classes, because we have this one on Sunday that's coming up next week, where I'm going to be starting with chapter 1. And then this Wednesday, I'm going to be starting a 4-part series on loving kindness meditation, where I'm going to be helping you to learn what that is and how to do it, and helping you build up that practice. Because now, if you've been doing breathing mindfulness meditation for the last 4 weeks, it's an opportunity for you to now start learning loving kindness meditation and bringing that in, because it's going to help you eradicate anger and bitterness and hostility in the mind. So have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day, whatever you choose to do, and Perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee krap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.